Welcome to Devmio London Week. We are recording an episode of the Signals podcast here live audience. So thank you so much for being here. I'm joined by Pieter and Martin. Thank you for joining me here today. So I guess we're going to talk about whatever you want to talk about, but really kind of the initial topic that I had in mind is we are all business owners, entrepreneurs, and involved in AI. You two particularly are solving some really interesting challenges with AI that I don't know that could be done any other way. So I would love to hear from each of you a little bit about kind of what your problems you're solving right now.
All right,
Go for it.
I'll start. So yeah, I'm Pieter. I'm the CTO of Emma. So Emma is basically a legal due diligence workspace. So the idea is whenever you sell or buy a company, you want to be sure that all the contracts are in order, that there are no legal liabilities there. So typically during an M&A track or even in an investment, you hire a law firm to read like thousands and thousands of documents to find like one needle in the haystack risk or a couple. And what Emma does, it basically automates that process in a way that lawyers can see every step of the way if there is something off with the AI, or can control it or can verify it, so that they don't have to read all the documents anymore, so that they just can review whatever the Emma workspace has found for them, so that they save multiple days or even months on a single deal.
Nice. That sounds very, very exciting. What do you got?
Yeah, basically I am Martin. I own VMG, which is basically a consulting firm for computer vision challenges. We cater the B2B2B crowd, so to speak. Basically, if you are a software company that is providing to your clients and you have processes that you want to automate, then basically at one point computer vision might be a very compelling option, also very deterministic and compelling option, so to speak. Basically, as soon as you start the process to actually implement computer vision, you need to figure out a couple of things to make it stick in production. And I think that's where most clients are calling us.
Sure. Is there a specific problem you're solving with computer vision, or just general, whatever your clients want to implement for their customers?
Yeah, basically most of the stuff that clients want to implement in computer vision space, but of course computer vision doesn't mean only RGB, it means also can be satellite imaging for defense purposes, can be multi-camera system for sports tracking, or can be MRI CT for medical applications. But this was in the beginning a little difficult to explain, but the technology is always the same basically. The recipes you use is the same, the experience you bring to the table are the same. But the modality, the domain, and the business might change. So that's why we cater to the B2B2B market, because basically we try to approach software companies that want to automate something for their clients.
Beautiful. So, I have a bunch of questions for both of you. There's so much to go with there. Taking a moment to talk about the legal aspect. How are you solving the problem of kind of traceability? You mentioned that the attorneys have the ability to see the process, what that looks like. That seems to be one of the things that's been challenging recently. So what are you doing to solve that?
Yeah, it is definitely challenging. But what we do is obviously we find liabilities in contracts. So the traceability in our case is basically showing like we found this liability and then just revert back to the right paragraphs in the document where the information comes from. And that's one simple way of doing this. So we always have to link back to the actual source, so a lawyer can say like, okay, that's what the contract says. Because there is zero trust, because most lawyers, they play with ChatGPT, they write a bad prompt in general, way too many questions, way too vague, not enough context. I mean, I can talk for hours on the things that they try, which is basically the way I first did my own prompts, so I can't blame them. But they get so bad results that they're like, yeah, ChatGPT doesn't work for me. Where they generally get good results is with drafting, and there are many drafting startups out there, but like proper contract review, really finding risks in contracts, that is pretty hard. So one way is showing the document. The other way how we do the traceability is we show our customers what we check for. So we have a bunch of built-in checks, legal things that we check for, and our clients can add their own database of checks, because every law firm often has like a specific set of things that they check for niche markets. So we have clients in renewable energy, and regulations on windmill farms in Germany are different than they are in Denmark or Belgium or even the US, well, especially recently. So they will check for very different things, and they will build in their own knowledge within the platform so that they have a structured way of working, which is something that they didn't have before. Usually they have just a bunch of juniors, and if they're lucky, they got a checklist and worked on it. But that way, they can actually verify what's being checked for and what has the system found and why. And is that really true? Is that really the case?
Nice. It's almost like maybe prompt engineering and getting good results is hard.
It is hard, but once you know the basics on, and I think the best trick is provide all the necessary context, be very specific in what you want and what you don't want, and limit the scope of what you're asking to a small question. But the problem is, if you limit the scope to a small question, you end up with thousands of questions to be asked over 1,000 documents. So, I mean, that's 1 million prompts that you have to do easily. Right. In our case, even more, because we split it up even further. So it's not manageable to do that as a human. And that's basically the offering that we do. We say, okay, we have cut it up in small pieces for you so that you just have to give in, I want to check for this. That's what I call high risk, medium risk, low risk. You push a button and we go. And we do everything automated, fully automated for you.
Nice. So how is that use of AI to solve problems vastly different from what you're doing in the computer vision space?
The question sounds as biased as my answer, probably. I think there are many parts to an answer here. But first of all, I think LLMs got incredibly popular because it's such a tangible product. I can actually pass my mobile phone to my parents with Gemini, GPT, or Claude, and they can actually interact with it. While I need like 20 minutes to explain what I'm doing to my parents, just to explain them actually, we try to actually find there's something in this picture. So it's not as sexy, it's not as appealing, and therefore also I think LLMs got pushed through the boards, through CEOs, CTOs into the company, while ML, so to speak, computer vision is now perceived as old-fashioned. But in my opinion, many ML use cases are just underrated because you have such a good measurability. With all the clients that I've seen and I've spoken that are also interacting in the LLM space, benchmarking, validating, and especially bringing stuff to production is way more difficult than in, let's call it, conventional use cases. I would not call it conventional because I also think the landscape in computer vision shifted like tremendously in the last couple of years. But we just have this scientific belief in metrics, numbers, and objective acceptance criteria, whereas LLMs, I mean, don't get me wrong, how often do you vibe check your application?
Not enough. That's the clear answer, the honest answer.
Yeah, but I mean, the term vibe checking is, for me as a diehard ML enthusiast for the last 10 years, already a difficult one, because I don't need to vibe with my tool. I need to have results in terms of like, is it 96 or 97%? And I think this is a huge paradigm shift, but I also think this is the biggest gap we have to bridge to bring LLMs truly to production-ready maturity.
Yeah, for sure.
I must say that I obviously made the transition, right, from traditional machine learning, even worked at the computer vision company many years ago, to nowadays LLMs. But what I really notice is that some things are just so easy now. you can go so much faster. And yes, you have to validate quite a bunch of things with data sets, but not everything really needs it. There are parts of the application that are not so key that you have to do this. And yes, there are parts in our application where we do have to do this, but you have some more leniency towards it, which allows you to go faster. If I remember back in the day, all the companies that I worked for, the amount of time we spent gathering data, like training set, test sets, that part, like the data engineering part was like 80 to 90% of the time that we spent on a problem, and then maybe there was like 5 or 10% of the time left for the algorithms, and then some implementation of the code or something like that. And that part is so crucial. But like you said, for computer vision, like the LLMs that are out there today, I wouldn't use them for computer vision. You can ask an LLM, is this a fridge? And yes, you get a reliable answer. But don't ask it much more specific things like how many screws do you see in the image or something like that. And then it basically starts failing. And these computer vision algorithms, the first breakthrough was in 2012. They're still so immensely powerful. Like the computer vision problem was in theory solved around 2015, where we reached like the first tasks where you have human level performance, whereas language, it took us to 2023-ish before we started reaching human level performance in language. So computer vision is just many years ahead, even though you still need to use old techniques. But yeah, you know this better than I do. There are ways how you can get by with less data and still get awesome results, which supersede human level performance, like much better than what you can basically get with LLMs, actually.
Absolutely. I think the good thing about the LLM space and the development in the LLM space is that you mentioned 80 to 90% is data, and I still think that holds value up to today. But I just think that you can build prototypes with a little less than 80% of the data, just because we have like many techniques like self-supervised learning, and there are really good and strong vision embeddings that you can leverage to bring your data requirements down to a meaningful level on a POC level. And of course, as you said, I think also without going too much into tech, I think your approach on how to solve things and how to do it with LLMs is still very ML methodology based, because you build very pointy things that you can benchmark.
Yes.
And this is, I believe nowadays engineers need this foundation and this deep understanding to build pointy things that are benchmarkable, be it LLM computers, computer vision, any space. And then you can make projects stick, because if you rely only on prompting and reviewing it by hand, then at one point you will probably...
And it's also the reason why, sorry for the technical term, why we use agentic workflows rather than agents. The difference is an agentic workflow, the steps are predefined. You have all the steps, and some of the steps you do with an LLM, and you can scope that step that LLM has to do very narrowly, and you can over-optimize that one single prompt to get like really good results. Whereas if you use an agent will determine the steps. And every step of the way, figuring out what then the prompt for that step will be, the agent will come up with the answer. And if you know how easily LLMs can hallucinate and come up with things, you know that that's opening a Pandora's box, and you see that at 50% of the time it works well, and 50% of the time you get complete bullshit. And companies like Cursor, for example, like the coding tool, they're mixing in the two together. They have like these fixed steps that they provide as tools towards their agents, so they can control part of it. So you see these mixed usages of agentic workflows combined with an agent that maybe picks which step to do in which situation. And I think that's the way how you engineer your way around this beyond what you have in the hype, where you can just say, okay, yeah, here's an agent. The agent can do everything. But under the hood, many of the steps are still agentic workflows where you can, for every step, check how well does it perform, how well does it work.
Sure.
Do you mind? I have one question because I find the angle very interesting.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Do you think you're talking about agentic workflows and like fully agentic?
Yep.
Do you think once we solve benchmarking, that fully agentic will unlock the next level of quality?
Well, quality, I don't know, but I think what you will see is a continuation of the step where you have workflow steps that are fully controlled, but that the agent has just more tools to pick from. I think that's the direction where we're going into. That's what I see with the large platforms. They won't tell you that that's what's happening under the hood because it's their agent that does everything and it's so fancy, but that's what I see happening, and I think that's the only way how you can guarantee some quality. And the tools they use can be a simple API call, or it can be using an LLM for a subtask, right? But what I think is what will uncover the next step, and that's what you see with OpenClaw and Hermit and those kind of tools, is that you just end up providing more and more tools to these systems, and they start using it. Even in Claude, you can define these, I forgot the name, where you start with / like these skills. Thank you. Luckily, we have a good audience. You can define these skills, and basically that's what a skill is, right? It's you have like a prompt for a specific sub-problem, and these LLMs can pick up these skills. And that's basically what you're building. You're building these agentic workflows in a way that an agent can just pick parts of it and assemble it the way it wants, and you still get reliable output the way you want to see it.
Thanks.
Nice. So I've been using AI, basically computer vision, for about 10 years now. And ironically, at the time, it was for a parking startup that I was working with. And at the time, I'd started trying to assemble all of these photographs of license plates and vehicles. We're like, oh, this is going to be a terrible training ordeal. And somebody on the team was like, hey, look, we should probably see if anybody else has already solved this problem. And sure enough, there's an API. You can pay a few bucks a month and get these answers. Mm-hmm. And it's been fascinating to me to see the almost commoditization of certain types of processes and algorithms and data sets in the AI space over a long period of time, quite frankly. I mean, this was 10 years ago when it was already well established in that space. You pass in a photo or even a video of vehicles, but you pass a photo of a vehicle and it tells you the make, the model, the color, the license plate, where it's from, like the country or state of origin, depending on the data. It's fantastic. And the biggest challenge we've had is actually convincing people that they want to give us a photograph of the entire vehicle and not just the license plate. And it turns out in testing, you could take the photo from the side of the vehicle, as long as it gets even a sliver of that license plate, it's like 98% accurate. It's ridiculous. So this has been around for a while. How are things shifting now in the landscape in terms of commoditization of these sorts of things? This is a situation where it's incredibly reliable input or output based on the inputs. How are we going to see more commoditization of this sort of thing? Is it going to be more the traditional approach like you're doing? Is it going to be more like structured LLM approaches? Where do you see this going?
I'll first admit a big mistake that I've been as a speaker talking about many years ago. I was always saying like, okay, the people who own the data will have all the power. Because within traditional machine learning, that's what you needed to build and train your models. And the moment that you owned the data, you had this power and you could build these things. With LLMs, that completely changed and just showed how wrong I was back in the day, because there is so much information on the internet. You even see that like in sales and marketing, that people start publishing a lot of information online for free. I think what you're doing with the podcast is in a way very similar, right? You have some expertise, but you share your expertise through podcasts, through talks, so that people know and recognize you for your expertise. And then obviously they try and implement it and might run into smaller issues. And obviously you're the most trusted person at that point to help out. So even in sales and marketing, you see that people are sharing lots of information. So information is becoming a commodity. And that's thanks to LLMs that we're now able to process raw and dirty data in a way that doesn't require you to say like, okay, this is the input and that's the expected output. No, you just give it a lot of text and go from there. So I'm in that sense really positive in that sense that we see the commoditization of information going forward. And even large enterprises that have lots of proprietary information, you see smaller companies starting to share because that's the way they gain market share, the way they gain trust. Podcasts like this where you obviously will invite speakers that want to share what's happening under the hood rather than say like, oh yeah, but we have the best agent doing legal work. No, I'm not going to tell you how it works, right? That's a very boring talk. Nobody will listen to it. So you see that commoditization is not only a trend within data, but also in the entire industry. So I see that actually progressing in the positive sense, and it just shows again how wrong I was back in the day.
I think, like looking at the traditional or computer vision space, I think I would not advise anybody to start a startup to detect license plates nowadays. But I think that there is still value in training your own models. There is still value in controlling your own data, because in the end, I think what is very underestimated in any of the machine learning spaces that you are always fighting a trilemma, so to speak. You're fighting a trilemma of accuracy, throughput, and latency, and there are cases where you just need low latency for certain things. An example is potato farming, for example. You can detect potatoes that are not ripe with a camera system, but basically it's a physical device where the potato drops in approximately less than 50 milliseconds to make a decision, and then you have to trigger basically an air blast that blasts the potato out of the production line. So if you call an API endpoint, detect potato at whichever provider you choose, by the moment that you get the response, the potato has been probably already fried to French fries. But this is a trilemma you have to solve, and in many cases, I still believe it makes sense to be able to do it. But you approach the problems vastly different than you did in 2018, because you can leverage student-teacher architectures where you basically take a big model that supports humans in a loop to label your data or classify your data or annotate, label your data, and then basically you take this knowledge you pre-prepared and you bake it into a super small model that even works on a edge device like a mobile phone or basically your toaster, so to speak. And this is all feasible because we had these advancements in this space in the last couple of years.
Yeah, but I even think, just advocating for you in this case, that there are still many tasks that you can't solve with LLMs. like especially computer vision.
Yes.
There, like I said, it will recognize a fridge, but can't tell you how many screws there are in a picture or something like that, right? You need custom models to get to reliable results. And it's not only a speed and performance aspect, that's something you basically get for free. When you use custom models, well, for free, if you know what you're doing, obviously, and you know how to train an efficient model. But anything that is not language based, so we bridge the gap towards audio, like spoken language, but everything else that is audio, that is video, that is image recognition, even recommender systems, even predictive maintenance, all these kind of things, like anomaly detection and signals, those kind of things, time series prediction, those kind of things cannot be solved with LLMs, because LLMs are, as the name says, large language models. So you need to be able to define everything in language. And yes, for images, we have data sets where they explain what's on the image, and it kind of helps. Graphs are also working much better, because there are lots of graphs online with people explaining how to read a graph. So those kind of things work generally well, but just plain images, that becomes is still very hard and will take us quite a while when we will catch up. And that's something that's still quite far away, well, far, a couple of years out before we start seeing the breakthroughs. And that still won't solve the performance things that custom models can offer you, because you will never be able to roll them out at cost, right?
Yeah, the Trilemma, Throughput, and Latency was basically an example, but of course with going a custom path, you can also influence the accuracy, which is one thing. And in the end, I mean, it boils down to the same thing as you do. The pointier your spare is that you're trying to build, in terms of like which problem you're trying to solve with the model, the more robust and more accurate solution you can build. And this holds true for computer vision things as for probably your legal document screening things, because the more precise and the more specific your task is, the better you can actually overfit on it.
Yeah, and it goes much wider than just machine learning. Like if you have a business, we specifically chose within Emma to focus on one niche, legal due diligence for M&A and investments. There are large players out there like Harvey and Ligora, awesome firms with massive valuations. We would never be able to compete with them. But they basically offer the Excel for lawyers, right? You can do everything with them, but once you get to, let's say you use them to track your customers, once you get to 100 customers, it becomes hard and you want to use a CRM. We're more like the CRM, but then for legal due diligence. So it's not only within models, the more specific you are, the better the solution you can build. It's basically in everything. So picking the right problem to solve and focus on that, it stays important. As I discussed in my talk just earlier, I mean, that even with LLMs, nothing has changed in that regard, right? We're still building the wrong things, the wrong solutions. And the more we can understand the problem that we're solving, then yes, AI gives us wings in many different ways, whether it's machine learning or LLMs or any other thing, just writing code, right? And that's always the key, finding the underlying problem to solve.
You heard it here, folks. AI lets you build the wrong thing faster.
It's honestly, it's what's happening. You see it all over the place.
Nice. So one of the spaces that I spend a lot of time in is web accessibility. And so one of the not yet solved problems that I would really like to see AI tackle is good alt text for images. And the reason it's not a solved problem is because there's two things required to make the alt text good. We can describe images to a reasonable level of accuracy today. That's great. Unfortunately, that does not make good alt text. Good alt text also needs to understand the context of the document or the explanation or the lesson or the training that's happening that the image is there to support. And it needs to contextualize what is contained in the image to the space that it's in. And this is a clear situation where you kind of need a multi-pronged approach to truly solve this well. And you may, in fact, I did some work with an education company recently, and they had engineering diagrams. And it turns out you kind of need models specifically trained on engineering diagrams in order to be able to describe the diagram. But I was impressed by how well those diagrams were explained. But then in order to truly contextualize those, you kind of need your language model to be tailored to the subject matter at hand to do a really good job of explaining why is this diagram with all of these, circuits and whatever super relevant to what I'm trying to teach you in this material. And those are, to me at least, really interesting open spaces because it does require a wide range of approaches and skill sets, I think, to solve them effectively. What are your thoughts on something like that?
I can give a similar example. So in the legal tech space, the largest player that uses LLMs is Harvey. So they were the front runners. They were one of the first that took GPT 3.5, ChatGPT 3.5 when it came out, and started fine-tuning the model to work better for legal documents. And it took them until, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago to abandon that. So for years, they have only been fine-tuning their own model to stay ahead of the competition. And then obviously Ligora comes along, and obviously we try as well, where we just pick off-the-shelf large language models. And we decided at Emma, we're not going to fine-tune because we noticed that the models are moving so fast that with prompt engineering, we can get the same result. In the beginning, we had to really engineer the prompts. Now it's even getting easier. And I think for the situation that you're describing, it's one of these niche cases that for the next 2 or 3 years, you will still need to fine-tune models to get good results. And once you realize this, you have 2 options. You can either choose to say like, okay, I wait 2 or 3 years and I don't do anything about it, and then it becomes a commodity, and then I launch, but then there will be 50 other companies doing the same. Or you can choose like, I'm going to do this today with the tools that I have available today to learn as much as I can about that space and that scope, but be aware of what new products and solutions are coming along, and I make sure I stay ahead. And there are very famous examples in industry that did something similar and are now leading companies. A good example is Spotify. And I obviously, back in my younger days when I was downloading stuff from the internet and didn't want to pay for it, I was obviously into these peer-to-peer file sharing things. But I realized not so long ago that actually Spotify built like an entire peer-to-peer file sharing network to be able to, if you click play on a song, to let it start playing within a few seconds. Because their servers could not handle the load. Like the internet did not support it. And they could have decided at that point, we wait a couple of years until the servers can actually handle it, and then we launch our product. Or we just build this peer-to-peer network right now today, and we spread out all the MP3s over the world, and we work with peer-to-peer file sharing, and we get this instant response. And that's what they did. And by doing that, they were the first ones, the front runners, to really capture the market, to understand like what do people value when listening to music. And that's why they're still the largest player in the world, because they had this head start. Even now it has been fully commoditized, and you have Google Music or whatever, YouTube Music, Apple Music, and I don't know how many other players out there, right? So my view there is, I think, yes, you still need to fine-tune, but don't let that be a reason to not start today, because you build up a moat that will help you out in the future.
So I'm not convinced you were wrong a few years ago about the person that controls the data. It's just that the data we're talking about is analytics. The people that have the analytics about what people want and how to serve it to them efficiently own the marketplace in a lot of cases. And the opportunities for startups in many cases are the places where nobody owns that intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah, so there is still this niches where the information is not publicly shared. But even there, I think gradually you will see that companies, usually smaller players that want to disrupt and get attention to show off how smart they are, start sharing blog posts, podcasts, whatever, on how to interpret that kind of data. And that just creates public knowledge. Like, I think we're going past the stage really where knowledge ownership is what defines you as a company. I think what really defines you is customer problem understanding. That's the key. That's the moat that you need to have as a company. And the information, that's secondary. Many old school companies still hold on to it, and these diagrams, that will be one of them. But in time, they will be disrupted, just not yet today. So for now, you have to do it in a different way.
I agree to a certain way, and I disagree in a certain way, because I believe that, yes, 1.5, 2 years ago, fine-tuning was the only way out, or the only way into a meaningful result, or towards a meaningful result, while nowadays you can prompt, yes. But I see also the risk that if you don't start a journey and you don't investigate this and you don't try to become better at what you're doing, then the risk that you might be absorbed at one point by one of the big providers is there. Because what part of the value creation are you really providing to the customer? Is it the customer's paying you money and you're just basically wrapping the money into a prompt and then shipping it to one of the big providers? And I'm not sure if this will be enough down the road, because
I completely agree. You see in the legal space that Claude now has lots of skills for lawyers, which is basically what Harvey and Ligora offer. Well, they have one added thing, that's tabular review, but you can let Claude generate a table as well. So you can basically put that in a skill and get that. The table is just not as nice to use because it's not a proper user interface, but they're getting closer. So you see that from the bottom up, Claude is eating away at Harvey and Ligora, and probably at some point they'll start finding niches like ours, who knows, where they start pushing the boundary, and we need to specialize and dig deeper. So I completely agree with that part. And you need to start there today so you can stay ahead of the curve, because otherwise you won't make it.
Yeah, and I mean, if you start today and you start basically to collect data in a meaningful way, and you get the chance to grow a market and collect data, you have also a fair chance to stay ahead of the game. But I just don't think that I would risk nowadays to start a company just as a wrapper for one of the big providers. And this is not like against what you're doing, because I think
in a way we are a wrapper around LLMs, but the wrapper is more than just a prompt that we offer. We see that the thing, and that's what differentiates us a lot from Harvey and Ligora. We build an entire user interface around the legal due diligence workflow that people have to do. If you look at the amount of time we spend on prompt engineering and working on AI, that's like 5 or max 10% of the time. Like 95% of the product development time is spent on that user experience around that. And that's where I think the difference will be, because the Salesforce at the time, they got the feedback like, yeah, you're just a wrapper around a database, which they were, right? It's like a user interface on top of a database, and everybody underestimated that part. But see where they are today, right? They're still a stupid wrapper on a database, but they built so much moat and logic on top of that they're now so big that, well, nobody wants to use them anymore and people go to smaller products. But still, I mean, they're used everywhere still today.
So I want to back up just a little bit and piggyback on something you said earlier, Martin, about kind of the approach. You left out the costs, and I'm curious how your approach varies when you consider in not only the cost of development, but the cost of operation. How does that change your approach to what tools you're going to use and how you're going to build solutions?
That's a very good question. Well, I think in both spaces, be it LLM, be it ML, I would just start with trying to achieve like the best result I can. And as soon as I see that I get traction, I would start to investigate like how to cut costs, how to bring costs down, and we can do that in a meaningful way. And there are you maybe don't need Sonnet or GPT-5 for a simple intent classification. At one point, maybe it's also okay to use a smaller model and maybe even train your own classifier or something like that to really bring costs down. I think what most people underestimate is that once you deploy the model, that the problem is solved. And I think that actually once you deploy the model, the real challenge starts, because all these day two issues occur once you're actually in production. And day two issues are not only cost relevant, but also things change. We have seasonality. I mean, Zalando doesn't need to sell winter clothes in peak summer. We had this one time during COVID 3-4 years ago where there was no toilet paper in Switzerland available. I mean, these are all events that are basically obvious if you zoom out and look into the broader picture. And I think once you ship something to production, you really have to start to monitor your costs and have an understanding where it might be interesting to invest money to move basically operational expenses towards an upfront investment.
I'll also be honest, and since this podcast is not going to be published online, I can be open about it.
Wait.
So, okay, just don't tell our investors. But we, like the solution that we offer, we sell it below cost. Because the thing that we try to achieve at this moment is showing the world that we can actually solve the problem. Mm-hmm. And we have a double gamble. The double gamble is that on the one hand, LLMs get better and cheaper. They get better, so that's clear. Lately, they're not getting cheaper because of the RAM shortages, but they get better. At some point, the cheaper models get to that level, and then we can switch parts of our workflow to cheaper models. And the other thing is, the moment that we have enough traction, then it becomes reasonable to start optimizing. Because I see many ways how we could optimize, but every optimization that we do makes us less flexible to adapt to new things that come along. So for us, it's like a double-edged sword, where I basically see like how much development cost it would be compared to the running cost that we have. And yes, from the moment that the running cost becomes higher than the development cost, then we can optimize and reduce our cost. And I think we can do like a 5-fold cost decrease, so then we're fine. But that will take some time and enough loan. So I think that's something that many large organizations don't have the luxury of doing, because if they launch something in production, they need people like Martin who can super optimize it and run it at like millicents per iteration, right? Whereas in our case, we just need to show that we can do it before we optimize.
That makes sense.
But I think this is basically the game that at the moment all the VC-backed startups have to play. Sell below costs.
So I can tell it to my investors.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's just, especially if
you can publish it. It's fine.
Thank you.
If you look into, for example, code creation space, I mean, don't tell me that the big players are break even at all, because I mean, token prices are basically going up with the better models currently, and I would for a long time, I would have signed off that token prices will come down, because for me, one of the promising things with Google is, for example, they have basically the whole stack. They own the stack down to the hardware, and then basically also the intermediate layer, the models, the data, everything. So they will probably be ahead of the competition in terms of costs. But with the recent developments and the demand, the exploding demand, I'm just a little worried that some startups will run out of funding, because we might still see a wave of increasing token costs with the current hardware shortage.
Yeah, that can definitely happen.
That can happen.
Yeah. What we see, which makes it interesting, is that the open weight models, people like to call them open source, but they're not. The open weight models, they become better and better. Like there's a talk, a guy here in the conference, John Davies, he doesn't have a talk on the topic this time around, but he clearly shows that the open weight models, they're like half a year behind on the top tier models, at least according to some benchmarks. And yes, hardware is still expensive, but they are also innovating a lot on reducing the running cost. And there, I think you will see a lot more competition happening in the open weight models, and other companies innovating way faster on reducing the running cost than that the big players are doing. Because it's still easier for us to just call an API endpoint, and yes, we have to do it in Europe, so we're always lagging behind because of that reason, just to make sure that our data stays where it's supposed to stay. But at some point, we'll also can switch to these open weight models, and from what I can see, the running cost is at least half. And if you would send your data to China, which obviously we can never do, you can cut your cost by 5 if you do it that way. So there are ways where you see the market evolving and giving solutions. But in general, like every version of ChatGPT since version 5 up to 5.5 seems to be getting like slightly more expensive. So it's not going in the good direction lately.
I see there another interesting statement in what you said. You consider going to open weight models, which is fine. As soon as you start fine-tuning open weight models, I think what most people underestimate is suddenly the costs are on paper smaller, but the real costs might not even be smaller, because the whole AI SRE topic behind it is just a huge can of worms for itself. Then suddenly you don't only have a software reliability engineering team, but you also need an AI SRE team, and you need to take care of that. And I think this burns more than just a 2x. As long as you can deploy vanilla to one of the big providers.
And we will only do it when we reach a certain scale and it becomes relevant. Yeah. And there are these companies like runpod.io that do parts of the work for you, but still not everything, because it adds a lot of complexity to your code base, because you need to start the pod and then, start with maybe existing models and then until the pod is running, and then start using that. So it adds a lot of complexity, and you need to manage and maintain that. And it becomes only relevant when you reach a certain scale at a certain cost.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is something where the small and medium-sized companies are struggling, because they are forced to pay the $25 or $20 per million token on one of the big providers, and they don't have that many alternatives, because any maneuver they do with an upfront investment is so big that it takes them forever to actually save then on token prices.
Yeah,
I think if you want to succeed in this space and you scale into this size where this becomes relevant, I think then you have a fair chance of surviving also a token price surge.
Nice. So we're basically at time, but there's one more question that I really want to ask each of you. And that is, what is the biggest thing you perceive as a threat or an opportunity or a challenge that you're looking at for the near future? Like, what's something you're kind of keeping your eye on for the future?
How broad or narrow do you want to define this? Is it linked to our business or just society in general?
You could go either way. I was thinking a little bit more narrowly focused, but like specific to our roles as engineers and entrepreneurs. I mean,
well, specifically in that regard, everything is moving really fast. Like things are progressing light speed if you follow it closely. And if you're working at a large enterprise, you still haven't noticed it. But if I've been in startups since, I don't know, more than 10 years. If I see how much shit you can get done today, how much faster everything is going, how many more startups are pursuing the same thing, it will be only a matter of time that major large enterprises are getting disrupted. And for me, I'm in the startup space. You might say, well, you're fine. You won't worry because you're in the startup space. But even for us, like we have to move really, really fast to stay ahead of the curve and to be able to compete with the Harveys and Ligores of this world with their multi-billion or even multi-hundred-billion-dollar valuations with a small team. And being able to do that is really key. And that's why I've been reading a lot about how Chinese companies are able to innovate so fast, because there's a key there that we're missing in the Western world that I'm pursuing. So I think that's the thing that basically keeps me up at night, apart from getting things to work, the day-to-day struggle, right? But the slightly longer term, and for us, slightly longer term, that's even a year, right? That's not super long term because it's so fast.
I think the huge opportunity that we have is we can do way more in the computer vision space that we could do yesterday. I think the whole topic around data quality control and everything came down to ridiculously low prices because we can leverage so much more technology than what we could have done like 6-7 years ago, even 3 years ago. It's just so much cheaper. But I see also this whole AI thing as a threat because I think AI is currently everywhere, and I just think that many people lose track of what is their real business problem. Where is their business creating value? Which challenges are we trying to solve? And that makes it for us at the moment a little more difficult to get into talks because they see us, or we often get perceived as old tech, whereas Dino V3 from Meta was released like two months ago, not even 2 months ago, and it's like this is again game changer in the computer vision space. And I just hope somehow that we find again reason in figuring out where we really want to create value and where companies make money and what the customers are willing to pay for, and we are not chasing like every detour that is solvable with some sort of LLM automation.
Sure. Great answer. Thank you both very much. Thank you so much for being here. This is a great conversation. Thank you to you who showed up in person and live. Appreciate you hanging out. Again, this is the Signals podcast. Do check out Devmio for all the latest and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.